all please rise and join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for all coming to the Board of Trustees meeting on January 23rd. We do have a presentation that will be coming up. But first, we have some individuals for public comment. The first person is Pamela.
Thank you. Can you hear me? My name is Pamela Balceris, and my residence is 89 Fordham Road in the village of Southampton here. I would like to bring the following to the attention of the board. I have been informed by the village that there are no codes or laws in place at this time regarding property maintenance of trees, bushes, etc. that grow from one yard into another residence. I was told it was a civil matter. I should take it up with an attorney or the attorney. I have been informed that anything growing over into another homeowner's yard, they have the permission to cut it down up to the sky. I respectfully request at this time that a new code be made by the village stating that a homeowner must be properly maintaining the landscaping on their property to make sure that this doesn't happen, that the bushes and trees grow over into another homeowner's yard, that they take care of it. The neighborhood homeowners should not be forced to physically remove the trees and bushes that are growing into their yard from another property owners. And if the person can't physically do it, then what is the elderly person forced to hire a landscaper? That's just unfair, and I request that the board look into that. The second thing is also regarding landscaping and property. At this time, I do not believe that there is a law regarding bamboo being planted in the village of Southampton. Now, bamboo, I don't know if you're aware, it can grow like wildfire from one neighbor's into another property. I am experiencing this right now at 89 Fordham Road from the property behind me at 88 Halsey Street. The bamboo grows through the property, through the fence, comes up, it's like spikes. You can't walk on it, it would hurt your feet. And also, this is damaging the septic system in my yard and going into into the foundations of the property. So I don't know at this time if there's a law that if perhaps a tree from a neighbor's property falls down and damages something in one yard, that person that owned the tree would be responsible, but I think they should be. And I'd like the village to please look into this business of the bamboo, because if it continues to be able to be planted and it grows and damages the neighbor's property, especially, God help us that it's an elderly person that can't afford to redo things, why should they be forced to pay for something that's not their fault and be unable to walk in their backyard because the spikes of the bamboo are coming up? So this is new to me. I don't know what the next step would be. I do have a copy of what I've spoken about and pictures of the bushes that are overgrowing. Could you please just, I respectfully ask, tell me what the next step is, what I could expect?
Have you gone to the building department?
Yes, I have.
Seen about legislation in regard to hedges and...
Yes, that's what I was told, that at first they said they were going to give me the proper codes regarding hedges and things like that. So I said to the young woman in the building department, I said, what if it's not a hedge? And then I was told, oh, just a moment. So I waited on the phone, and then they came back on the phone and told me that the village does not have anything regarding this. It is a civil matter. I said, what do you mean? They said, you have to get an attorney and speak with the other homeowner and go back and forth like that. I don't feel that's right. So that's what I was told, that it's a civil matter, and I was told if I wanted to bring it to your attention, I should come here to this meeting. So I am respectfully bringing the matter of the overgrowing bushes and trees into the yard. If you can't afford to cut them down, have someone cut them down, or physically do it yourself, what is the homeowner just forced to live with this, to grow into their yard for all eternity? And what about, the bamboo issue? It's becoming more and
I think the bamboo
more.
is a very interesting issue.
Yeah.
And I also want to just ask you a question. Is it trees that are growing over, or are they actual bushes? And are the bushes growing over the line of the property, or what seems to be
Would you
happening?
like to see the pictures I have?
Yes.
If you could,
Here you go. Oh, there might be a copy of what I just stated in there, but that's fine for you to have. They're trees and they're
Put one
evergreens.
picture on the desk there, and the rest of the
This is some of them.
audience could see it.
arborvitae's.
Oh, sure, please.
Yeah, it's not a hedge, it's not a privet hedge or anything like that, which I understand there are some codes. They're trees, and there's also branches of evergreen bushes, and they're growing up, as you can see, quite large, and they're coming over. See the branches towards the lower part, they're sticking right through the fence, coming into the yard. And the person has shown no interest in trimming what's on my side of the property. And so now, if I can't do it, I'm forced to hire a landscaper to do this. And it's not my bushes, it's not my fence. I mean, it's not my trees,
Did
rather.
you speak with, you obviously spoke with them?
With who, the homeowner? We mentioned it to them previously, I believe. We, at this time, have other issues which I will not address at this meeting with that homeowner. So I respectfully request, number one, that be looked into so that I don't have to have the expense or physically do that myself, and I don't think other homeowners should, because there is no code as far as I've been told. And like I said, the bamboo, it's more than just in the village here in Southampton. I've seen it other places. I've been told that other places that do have bamboo allowed to grow, that deep in the ground, they have to put some kind of concrete, so that this can't happen. But we're beyond that. It's growing into what was my elderly father-in-law's yard. It's growing through the yard. This is a small village, there's a small piece of property. The septic system is in the back. All the roots and vines are coming into that. And it may very well end up being a costly thing. And I don't feel that we should have to pay for that when it's someone else's bushes and vines causing the damage. So that's what I would like to respectfully request you look into. And will I just get a reply back or in the mail or?
Interestingly, I had the same issue with a neighbor whose hedges, not bushes, were several feet over our property and strafing the back of our residence. And I was advised by our code enforcer to send the owners of the property a letter notifying them of this and asking them what day their landscaper could come and cut the hedges on our side, meaning we were expecting them to cut their hedges, not the other way around. And that, the code enforcement officer came over, he looked at the site, he saw that it was, an encumbrance on our property, and that did occur. And they came with a landscaper, we arranged a date, and they took it all down. So I'm not sure if the code that you were given was quite accurate, and I think we need to go back and look at that.
It was here at the village office. They were sending me the code regarding hedge. And when I told them that it was not hedge, we're not talking about privet hedge. I mean,
Right.
I didn't go into the trouble of reading through the whole thing because it was regarding privet hedge, which is not pertaining to this matter. Then I was told it's civil. It's just basically up to me to deal with this. And this neighbor, like I said, at this point, there's other issues. And I think they're also going to be going away a little bit. I don't feel I should have to go back and forth with them or have an attorney. There should be some type of a rule regarding that. And like I said, this, while it's a pain, the bamboo could be a very costly issue in the near future for us if something isn't enforced.
Well, what we need to do is get the code enforcement officer to go to the property and take a look, so we need to know what's going on.
Is there only one code enforcement officer?
Presently, yes.
Angel Perez?
Mhm. So we'll get him to take a look.
Thank you very much.
Just out of curiosity, before you run away,
I'm not running anywhere.
where this intrudes on her property, Does the village have any power tools that can reach up to that and would come in and shave it off at least? If we weren't smart enough to have a rule that handles this, it's just a thought that maybe we could do it, because there's lots of times we're accused of our people sitting around with nothing to do too. So we could say we're putting them to, it's just a thought though, that maybe they could reach that. You can't really drive on the property. You might do more damage if if you used a truck with a bucket. It would work, but I don't think there's enough room, and there's a cellar door there and all that sort of thing. But you might be able to.
Well, I think the first thing is to see what's going on.
And look at the code carefully.
And you'll also address the issue about the bamboo? Thank you very much.
Ma'am, before you go, is the correspondence you submit have your address and phone number,
Yes.
contact information on it, so that we know how to get a hold of you? Okay.
Yes. Mr. Perez knows how to get a hold of me, believe me. Yes, my cell phone number is on there, that you can reach me at any time.
Okay, we have a copy of that?
Yes, you have a copy of what I just stated. I have a copy, and you have the pictures there.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yep, absolutely.
We have another individual with a public comment, Rob Coburn.
I'm Rob Coburn. I live at 345 Hill Street. And I'm here because of really two quick items. I read with interest the article on the proposed bond for upgrades to playgrounds, which I think generally is a very good idea. It's also a large amount of money. My question related to it is, at this point, is there any detail or line item information beyond the large sort of partition figures that were given in the article in the Southampton Press, which I think had some site work and some installation costs and some other costs? At this point, is there any more detailed budget or cost figure that's available?
Yes.
If you want to stop in Friday, I can walk you through.
Okay.
Yeah.
I stopped in today and I was told there wasn't.
No, there is.
No,
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And the second quick issue is I'm just wondering if there's any update on steps that are being taken to address traffic safety, either steps that are taken or budget considerations or actions of that nature to advance the issue of traffic safety in the village.
Well, I know they did go out and do some sign changes. I think they moved some signs around, and as you pointed out, there were a couple of signs that were right on top of each other. So, without a doubt, traffic is an ongoing proposition, and it's going to take a while.
Gary did tell me that they had, I think he said they had ordered one of those speed lights so that westbound traffic going out of the town somewhere, I forget exactly, maybe.
Either side of Breeze Lane, I
Yes.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That was going to happen.
Okay. I know that, well, because you and I met with Gary, and Gary had also mentioned that he thought it was time and an appropriate step to take to hire an engineer for a traffic study of major village arteries. I'm wondering if he's made that recommendation to you, if there's been any discussion along those
No,
lines.
we haven't done that as of yet.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll tie the two together and say if we can spend $2.5 million on playgrounds, I believe we can spend a few $1,000s on a traffic study, because I want people to get to the playgrounds safe
Yeah.
and get home safe. Thank you.
No, well taken. Thank you. Does anybody else have a public comment they'd like to make? Then we're going to move ahead with a board presentation on the proposed emergency communications and cell tower.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the Board of Trustees. My name is Ralph Weingarten. I'm from Falk and Foster at 678 Front Avenue Northwest, Suite 215 in Grand Rapids, Michigan, 49504. And I assist Hemp Hill LLC with some of their zoning and permitting and public meetings. I've got a team of people here with me today that can kind of help answer any questions and address some comments too, if they kind of go beyond my own knowledge. I've got with me Rhonda Hunt Brown, who's the Director of Business Development for Hemp Hill. and Rich Conroy, who's president of PureCon Solutions. He's a consultant on the radio frequency and antenna design. And Donna Marie Stippo from DMS Consulting Services. She's the one that was running around taking pictures on January 10 when the crane was up and the basket was hanging there. And I also want to thank all of you tonight for your time and staff for their time. And we felt it was a good time before proceeding any further with any formal process to kind of take this time to get the information out to the community about this project, to solicit comments, questions, thoughts that people had. And so I'll make a general presentation first, and we've got some packets that were distributed that have a fact sheet on top with just kind of some general information that I'll walk through. And then there are some attachments as well. And when we get to those, I'll put those out on the table as well so the audience can see those. And, the partnership here is to improve communication and information exchange for public safety, for the residents, for businesses, for visitors. At the core of every community is the need to communicate and to exchange information, and that's what we're here today for, about exchanging information about this project and communicating, and that's what this project is for too. From an infrastructure standpoint, this project is going to have both kind of a public and a private dimension to it. On the public safety side, for dispatch, reliable communication is needed to all areas of the village, and we want to be able to create the distance outward so that all the beaches and residential areas can be covered, and there's some weak areas now. And once that's in place, receivers in the field can be positioned for individual radios that the officers have. On the private side, we want to have good communication as well. A lot of that's for convenience, looking up a recipe, streaming a how-to video, that kind of thing, but there's definitely a personal safety dimension to not just voice calls for emergencies or health events, but also things like Amber Alerts. People look at the radar if there's a storm coming, get information about driving conditions before they leave their home. So it's really become a tool for individual personal safety as well. As far as the need goes, the core area of need is to the southwest of the police station, extending through the residential area on towards Cooper's Beach. And I know from a public safety standpoint, you've had incidents out there, particularly when there's no lifeguards after the Labor Day season, with swimmers that get caught in riptides or other situations. And this proposal is aimed to address that and make sure we've got strong signal out in that area. And as far as cell service as well, out there at the beach, and we'll look at some maps in a second, we've got the same situation. I've got Verizon, and I hear that that's the best out there, but I had one or two bars when I drove past there. Rhonda was in the car with me with AT&T, and she didn't have signal in some spots out there as well. And we're here for T-Mobile today, and that service will be improved as well, but the project is intended to be available to multiple providers so that everyone's service can be improved across the board. As far as the location, the proposed location at the police department headquarters at 151 Windmill Lane is situated kind of back by where the new impound lot location is. We haven't nailed down exactly the specific, but that's the general area on the property that we're looking at. This particular location is closest to the area of need in terms of practically what's built. Everything towards the beach from there on out is all residentially built and residentially zoned. Your zoning ordinance calls for us to look at village property first in terms of a hierarchy of preference for these types of sites. And there's no further village parcels in that direction either. So we've picked a location that best meets the requirements of your zoning code, best meets the actual situation as it's built out there, and also happens to be adjacent to the dispatch center as well. In terms of alternatives, I'll kind of switch over here and put some information. We use T-Mobile as the model. They're going to be our anchor tenant. And I've got a map here that shows this is the proposed location at the police headquarters here. T-Mobile is currently located at the Suffolk County Water Authority tank over on Prospect, kind of near the Moses Lane park area that you guys are looking at. They're on the neck of the tower at about 70 feet high. And then they're also on the Powell Avenue monopole that AT&T put up a couple years ago. And they're at the 120-foot level on that. And then they're also on the hospital rooftop at about 70-foot antenna level. So that just kind of gives you an idea. All of these sites are less than a mile from this proposed location. So in terms of capacity as well, we've got sites pretty close together here. In terms of alternatives, I know there was a village parcel that was mentioned at one time, 35 Flying Point Road, and I think that's some storage area out there, and that's actually off the map over in this direction. So that's not going to help over in here. So yeah, this represents the location closest to the residential area, and then the beach that's farther off, and the additional height that we're proposing is going to be able to give us service all the way down to the beach. And I'll get to that with some maps and plots in a second as well. In terms of design, based on the drive testing, what we looked at is a 155-foot steel monopole, and the cell providers would be located at antenna center lines of 150, 140, 130, and 120. And generally, the cell providers operate at higher frequencies than the emergency services. Their signal does not propagate as far, and so the additional height enables them to get that coverage all the way down to the beach. We've reserved the 90 to 110-foot slot for the public safety VHF antennas for the fire department and for the police department, and those operate at a much lower frequency and can propagate a lot farther, and so they're able to get the same type of coverage, same extent of coverage, even though they're lower in height on the pole. And then further down the pole is just some local control station antennas for public safety and a small microwave link for the village as well to transmit the information to the dispatch and ambulance and so forth.
Is that at a height of 100 feet? Is that what this map is saying?
This is 155 is the monopole height.
No, I mean for the Southampton Village Fire Department.
The center line of the antennas is at 100 feet. They're whip antennas, so they're mounted on arms that extend about 6 feet from the pole at the 90-foot level, and then they go up 20 feet, so that the tip of the antenna will be at 110. 110. Okay. So they're omnidirectional antennas that send signal in all directions, rather than the panel antennas that you typically see with the cell providers that are directional. Of the types of towers that we looked at, the lattice self-supporting towers are generally more flexible in terms of future users and different antenna mounting spots. But in this particular case, we're trying to balance aesthetics and kind of be more compatible with the neighborhood. So we're not looking at a guide tower or a self-support, which is like the Cablevision tower that's over by Powell Avenue. This is a monopole design, which has the smallest footprint and the slimmest profile of the different types of towers.
But from what I'm seeing, if this is what it looks like, is that what it looks like?
Yeah, those are the photosims. We'll get into those, yeah.
There's no other cell tower in the village over 100 feet except for one. The other two only hit 70 and 80 feet, right?
Just the Powell Avenue Tower, I believe, is about 165. And then there's the Cablevision Tower, which they booted the cell providers off,
Oh,
which
okay.
is at 300, 300 plus maybe.
Oh, okay.
I'll get some of the drive test information up so you can see the effects of the different heights.
Is there any way to disguise these? I mean, I know that sometimes you take throughways and they have poles that look like trees. I'd like to know, it's just so obvious. I don't know if there's any way to disguise this.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and usually when you get into different types of designs, like a flagpole or concealment within the pole, it starts to limit the space available. Often the compartment within the pole will hold like 3 panel antennas, and it's not uncommon for carriers to have 3 or 4 per sector for a total of 9 or 12 on a particular platform level. So what tends to happen is when they're using different technologies or have different things going on with their antennas, they need to occupy multiple compartments. So it's not uncommon to see a flagpole with 3 compartments, but they're all occupied by a single carrier. And so then you wind up with multiple single carrier types of sites rather than a single solution for multiple providers. And so that's one of the factors here is a design like that would not only be space limiting, but it'd also get at the height level, because the more vertical space you're occupying per carrier, the less ability you have to provide service down towards the beach and in the area that
But
it's
if you had
in.
multiple, you would be able to. So if you had 2 or 3 shorter with multiples within that, that was camouflage, and then you had something down at the beach that was also camouflage, you could handle that area down there. Is that correct?
I'd have to let Rich speak a little bit towards that in the future, but I know in terms
Just asking
of...
some questions
Yep,
to
that's
make this more
good questions,
palatable.
yep. Yeah. There's a lot of limitations, and I'll give Rich some time to think about that while I'm going through here as well too. Right here, what we've got is a set of exhibits at the 700 megahertz frequency and a set of exhibits at the 2100 megahertz frequency. Those are 2 frequencies that T-Mobile uses. The other cell providers are kind of fall within that range as well. And the 2100 frequency is a higher frequency where the signal doesn't propagate as far. It has a lot of capacity to handle a lot of volume of data, and a lower frequency like 700 with the waves from that can propagate much further, so you get better coverage, but you don't have near the capacity to handle as many calls or as much data. And so what T-Mobile does is use both technologies, and as the people on the 21 megahertz frequency, as it fills up with usage, and they detect that some of the users are in areas where their signal's getting weaker, or they need better coverage, they get rerouted to the 700 frequency. And so if you've got a lot of people downtown in the summer in the core business area, they would mostly be on 2100, but then as you get some users on the beach that are having issues with their signal on that, they would be switched to the 700 megahertz, and that would give them better strength of signal down there. But with the limited capacity, if you're in a busy summer season type situation, for sure, you're not going to have enough capacity there still to handle that by itself with the existing sites. And so Exhibit A here represents the existing T-Mobile service based on the drive testing. And to kind of give you the key here, green represents reliable LTE coverage if you're inside a building. Yellow represents reliable coverage if you're inside of a vehicle. and gray represents coverage if you're on the street, and then anywhere if it's white, that's when you're not having a signal at all. So currently, from a 700 megahertz standpoint, there's in-vehicle coverage in a lot of this residential area, and some on the beach as well, but not a lot of in-buildings. So people in the homes throughout this area, roughly south of Hill Street, are going to have more difficulty getting signal inside their homes. If you go to the next map down, that's at the 120 level. And the
What exhibit is that?
This is Exhibit C.
C.
And Exhibit C shows the drive testing at 120, and that's improved in a lot of the yellow areas that were formerly in vehicle only, improved a lot of those areas up to in-building coverage. And then at the 150 level, which is Exhibit D, you see that that's improved yet again to the point where substantially most of this residential area is showing in-building service is strong. And then Exhibit E is at the 180 level. And if you compare Exhibit D and E, you see that there's not a lot of areas of improvement, and that's kind of what enabled us to say, let's look at proposing a 150 antenna center line rather than a 180 antenna center line. Even if there's some incremental improvement at 180, we're willing to sacrifice that because from an aesthetic standpoint, that's yet another 30 feet to talk about. And so we feel that from between 120 to 150, that's going to allow the different providers to all be able to have sufficient signal strength to reach into that area of residences and onto the beach. Over to Exhibit B, that's the current signal strength with the 2100 megahertz frequency, which is the primary LTE frequency that T-Mobile uses. And as you can see there, there's a lot of gray in this residential area. And then down by the beach here too, you see as you're driving along, there's some gray and then there's some white and some gray and some white and some gray and some white, which is basically saying you don't have signal in some of those spots. Some of them you might have signal if you're outside of your car. Probably don't have anything if you're driving. And the 120 is Exhibit F, and at that level, we're able to get the 21 megahertz LTE signal up to the level where you've got pretty consistent in-car coverage all the way along Meadow Lane, along the beach there, and in the residential neighborhoods. So it's still not helping people inside their homes necessarily, but in terms of beach coverage or people either out on the beach or in their cars, signal should be strong enough at 120, and that would be the lowest cell provider level on the tower that we were showing. Then up to 150, which is the tallest provider level. Again, we've got, that's Exhibit G. Again, we've got strong in-vehicle coverage throughout the area. Still not seeing a lot with in-building coverage at the 2100 megahertz level, but I think that's as good as we can do in this particular situation. And then if you look finally at Exhibit H, that's at the 180-foot level, and there are a few green dots starting to appear where some homes might pick up some in-building coverage, but again, it's not so extensive and so different that we're going to say we need 180 as opposed to the shorter tower height. So based on these drive test results, it's our proposal that kind of the best fit for the community in terms of cell coverage would be that 120 to 150 foot range that would be able to provide space for 4 different providers. And then I'll pick these up, and I've got a plot that deals with public safety a second too. Okay, this plot is Exhibit I, and that deals with proposed 150 megahertz coverage, and that's the much lower frequency that the public safety system is using. And this is the predicted coverage at 100-foot antenna center line. And again, that's with these omnidirectional antennas, which start out mounted at 90 and extend up to 110. So the center line of the antenna is 100. And again, the same color code. Green is reliable in building service. Yellow is reliable in car service. And gray is outside your car. And as you can see on this map, the talk out strength of signal does reach the entire beach area, either in a green status or at least a yellow status, which would be in vehicle, and so any emergency response type situation would be still with insufficient signal. And once this talk out coverage is created, we're still looking at like receiver information, but you'd place receivers in the field for the individual radios, so that when the responders talk on like a walkie-talkie or radio, that they would their communications would get back to the dispatch center through these field receivers. So this is the outgoing signal that comes from dispatch. And as you can see, comparing it to the cell providers, it compares favorably even with the lower height. Next, I'll get into some of the photo simulation views. These photos that these are based on were taken on January 10. The analysis was conducted by Donna Marie with DMS Consulting. This is during the leaf off time, so it's kind of a worst case scenario. It's a good time to take photo sims because they're not obscured by vegetation or leaves. And so how this was done was a crane was placed at police headquarters. The top of the crane was actually at about 197 feet. Then they suspended a basket below with the equipment to do the drive testing, but also representing the height of the tower. And they suspended that to represent the height location. And so these photo simulations were all done to Photoshop in the tower at the height of the basket level. People who were driving around or saw the crane when it was up, I know Donna Marie was telling everybody, don't look at the top of the crane, look at the basket. The basket is what represents where the top of the tower will be. We've shown 11 representative vantage points here from different directions looking toward the tower. And we've got a project location map that's in your packet, and that illustrates each of the areas from which we've done a photo simulation view. Donna Marie did take additional pictures, so if there are other areas or questions from people from different locations that stand out, we can check and see if we maybe have photos from that area as well to present at a future time. For this particular set of photo simulations, we have before and after views. The first view is from the front of 98 Main Street, looking west. And let me put this beside it here. Yeah, it's view one from kind of the north end of the core downtown district with some of your historic storefronts and so on. In the after photo, the tower is kind of nestled between two of the leafless trees there. In the summertime, when those leaf out, that will help screen visibility from that location. The second location is from the intersection of Pond Lane and Job Lane, looking northwest. And that is down at kind of at the south end of your core business district. You can see the tower peeping up above the different storefronts here. We've also got some of the overhead utility lines. And
Which view are you on?
on view 2,
Pond Lane.
Pond Lane and Job Lane intersection.
This is 2, and then measure it, so you can see it.
Maybe you can point to that word.
This is,
That's the tower.
Yeah, the actual photo.
Yeah, right here.
Charlie.
corner of Joe's and Windmill here. Joe.
Are you on
Hill.
this?
Yes, that's
Yes.
what he's
Take
on.
that off the board, he'll pick it up.
This one right here.
You're on this picture?
Yes, yes.
No, the picture of the tower is right there, I take it. your
That's
tower.
correct. That's
Is
correct.
that how it would look?
Yes, that's a simulation of how it would look.
In other words, all those little containers or whatever they are, that's part of the...
Yeah, that's shown with the antenna design of a standard antenna platform. And as I mentioned, about 3 or 4 antenna panels per sector is generally what they use in industry. The next view, 3, is from the rear parking lot of the library, looking northwest. And that would be at that location there. And then we've also got a view number 4, which is from 97 Cooper's Farm Road, the condominiums. That's from kind of the
Can see my
parking area,
wife.
right in the middle, right between your, yeah.
Where's the schnauzer?
And then view number 5 is going to be from 119 Cooper's Farm Road. And just so you can see, it's right here. There's the police station, Cooper's Farm Road curves up, and then 5 is right here. So it's pretty close to the backyard of the police station. And then the next view is a little bit further back on Cooper's Farm Road. Yes, this is the tower one here. Right here. That's from this location right here. And then I think that's last on this board. So I'm going to jump to the next board.
Here's the 2 pages.
Now, that tower simulation is with 5 providers on it, correct?
I believe there's 4 shown on this one here.
Okay.
View number 7 is right here. And that one is from across from 107 White Street, looking southeast. And that's right up here. Police station is here. There's the intersection, or the view from White Street where that is, looking toward the tower.
I don't know how this could be Windmill.
And then view number 8.
Doesn't it?
View number 8 's from the front of 205B Windmill Lane, looking south. And that is right in that location there. View number 9 is taken from Bowden Road, looking southwest. That's from up in this location, looking towards the police station here. View number 10, down here, is looking from the parking lot of the Stop and Shop across from the police station. And then lastly, we have one looking up the driveway toward the tower location, right from out front on Mill Lane. And
It's not the hotel, it's the police station. That's the
with
police
all
station.
these photos, it is visible infrastructure because it works on a line of sight basis. So just like a water tank or overhead lines, it has height to it and it's visible. Obviously, if you're within the first block or so, it's more visible, and as you get farther away and there are more structures and trees, it tends to start to recede into the background. So that's what we've got for photo simulation views. I'm happy to open it up for any questions you have or comments or observations. And again, I do have Donna Marie here who took all these, and she has a lot more detailed information about each location if you've got particular questions about that. And then Rich Conroy is here, and I guess I can give him a moment too, if you wanted to address design, like.
Well,
there.
I have one question on, that relates to the height. You refer to the center line at 155?
Center line is at 150, and the
Okay.
monopole itself is 155.
But
So
then you have a 6-foot lightning pole on
6 foot-
top of it.
6 foot lightning
So you're really
rod.
161 is where you're at.
that would be a total tip height, like from an FAA perspective, although the lightning rod is thin enough that usually that's not very visible.
Okay.
So.
Can you just take me back to the other properties? On Powell Avenue, we have Cablevision, which is 300 feet high, but
Yep.
they've thrown all the providers off.
Right, they're a competitor, and my
Okay.
understanding is that they booted competitors off when their lease ends. They said, we're not going to renew it, so when your lease ends, you got to get off and have an alternative. And I think Capital Telecom and AT&T came to you guys a couple of years ago and said, they're not renewing our lease. We designed our system, based on being in this location. Now we need a replacement, and.
Is that the one by the railroad station?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I
And
think
we
that was
have the other one by Mariner, also Powell Avenue, but it's back in where the car repair places are. There's one in there as well.
Cablevision.
That's only
yeah.
cable?
That's the 300-foot. Yeah, I've got a picture.
Oh, okay, so
And then on Moses, what do we have there?
On the Moses Lane area, there's a water tank. It's a Suffolk Water Authority tank. It's like a spheroid tank, and then the carriers are on the neck of the tank, mounted kind of below that sphere.
And we know the height of the tank to be roughly,
The carriers are, T-Mobile's at 70 feet.
Okay.
The sphere is above that, so it's, probably 110, something like that,
Okay.
maybe. I'm just throwing it out. I don't
Okay.
have any knowledge, but I'm just guessing.
and then the hospital is the last one.
Yeah.
And we have T-Mobile on the water tank on Moses.
Yes, we have T-Mobile on the
Okay.
water tank on Moses, on the monopole on Powell Avenue, and on the hospital rooftop.
Okay, I think that's where you were getting at, Nancy, the monopole on
the one by the train station.
train station. Okay, and then the hospital is also T-Mobile.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, there are other providers at these locations too, so like, AT&T or Verizon, and I'm not sure where all the locations are, but there are multiple antennas at the hospital and at the monopole, and there's at least one more provider on the water tank too, I think.
So for this to work well, and this may not be the question you can answer, perhaps it's Rich, the pole has to be high,
Yes.
and what is the distance that it can project?
That's partly a function of height, and Rich might be able to address this better too, but it's a function of height because it's a line of sight thing too, and all of the providers that are in similar spots as T-Mobile will have a similar type of need to cover that residential and beach area. So this answer for T-Mobile we see as an answer for their needs as well. So Hemp Hill's in the business of putting up towers that get carriers on them because they want to make money, and in this case share the revenue 50%, which they're estimating it would likely be $5,000 per provider per month, and they would share half of that, so the city would be in a place to get $2,500 per provider. So if there were 4 on, for instance, that would be $10,000 monthly.
Has there ever been an analysis done, and Nancy, you may know this, as to why that section of the village isn't getting reception? Do we know why it's not getting reception?
I would say just from a non-expert standpoint is because there's no site in that area, and because it's all, large lot residential with very high-end homes on it all the way down to the beach. And you really, if you could, you'd wish to plunk a tower like right in the middle, about halfway down Halsey Neck, to the beach in someone's backyard, but there's nothing but homes there, and no village parcel, no business district parcel, no alternative structure, nothing really there.
Litigious people live down there.
But so I think I just need to understand the perimeter better. So how high does it have to be? What are the drivers? The height and the distance. So if we were to take a protractor, what would be ideal to do that? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a very good question. My name is Rich Conroy, for the record, with PeerCon Solutions, and I did the radio frequency analysis. The answer is the height obviously is going to provide more distance of coverage, but when we're looking to fill a gap, the location is even more important. So when you look at the drive test map that was up, maybe you want to pull that up again, for T-Mobile's existing coverage, it shows the coverage range of their existing sites, and as you go away from the sites, the signal drops off due to terrain and the height that those facilities are at, and leaves a gap. So the map that he has up now is 2100 megahertz. You can put 700 next to it as well.
So the closest to the area that doesn't have coverage right now is Moses, and even if that height were to be elevated, it couldn't alter the coverage capability?
Yes, correct. So Moses, I'm pointing to right now, is a water tank facility. Yeah. And that's at about 70 feet. It's not possible to raise the height of that to the bowl of the tank due to the tank has restrictions if it's mounting actually to the face of the tank. And as you get above the top of it, you actually will get some reflection and blockage of signal. So on the neck is really the appropriate spot for the mounting location. And as the plot demonstrates, the terrain starts to drop off as you look towards the ocean, towards the beaches. And the signal drops off, and we leave this gap area that I'm circling my pen around. That's basically from Hill Street south down to Meadow Lane. That whole area is contained with the gap. So locating a facility in the center of that would allow you to achieve your area of coverage with the least height. Because you're there, you're in the problem area. As you move away from the gap area, you actually need to increase the height to try to project that signal into the area. Roughly, the signals will propagate about a square mile for in-building coverage.
Regardless of height?
Yeah, regardless of height, because height, the terrain elevation, all that is taken into account. So the water tank is a higher ground elevation than the subject site, by about 20, 30 feet, okay. But the subject site's higher in height for the overall tower. So the overall difference between the two is about 50 feet difference in height, greater height at the proposed location, and that's why it's providing some signal into that area. Although it's coming from an area further away and sort of adjacent to the existing coverage areas from other sites, it needs to be higher to propagate in there. The alternative is placing the facility in the residential zone, which is, sometimes not desired as being, within a public safety and a police department location.
If you had,
This is residential.
if this thing is
Yes.
objectionable to people. It's going to be its visibility, and
Yeah.
that's got all the confetti at the top. Is it possible to, we have a big flagpole on Monument Square, and if we had a flagpole at Cooper's Beach, can one flagpole communicate with the other, relay, and then you're now going from Cooper's Beach with your signal, which would easily reach the inlet, I would think?
Well, each site operates independently as their own coverage zone, and then the users on their devices will communicate to a tower when they're in range of the tower. And then those towers
One
are
tower
connected.
communicate with another tower?
Well, each of the towers are connected together through the national telecommunications network, through either fiber optic cables or microwave, bringing them back to the telecommunication network. So as a user's communicating to one tower, they're essentially all kind of connected in one way through that web, if you will. But from the radio frequency perspective, just the RF through the air, a user is communicating with one tower at a time in one sector. And as they get out of range from one tower, they get closer to the next, they will hand off or switch to that next tower, and they'll communicate on tower number 2, and then they'll move to tower 3 as they're moving around an area. So putting a tower at the beach, maybe a small tower, may cover the beach area and part of the southern section of that residential area. That would be a way to cover some of that area and enhance some of the in-building coverage down in that area, especially at the higher frequency, the 2100 megahertz frequency, which couldn't cover down there.
We already have a flagpole at Dune Beach, and of course we have which isn't, I don't know the height of it, but it's not all that grand. But the one at Agawam Park is a very substantial tower. Now, I don't know the exact height of it, but you are saying that one tower can communicate with another tower, which...
Well, they communicate their coverage range. They're not communicating with the other towers, but you want to have sort of overlapping signal from each tower. So as the user moves around, they have seamless coverage. So the maps that we presented, where it shows green going to yellow, they're having some seamless communication to the next tower, but not for in-building use. So they're going to drop when they go inside a building. To have the whole area green would allow that to communicate seamlessly across that entire area for in-building use.
I live in a brick home, quite close to this tower, proposed tower. My inexpensive cell phone, I call my daughter in San Francisco, and how many, does that just go through 1,000 towers? Is that what
No, you're just going to the closest tower that you're receiving a signal from is what you will communicate. Think of it like a cordless phone in your house.
Can that reach San Francisco? I mean, would
Yes.
this...
So if you have a cordless phone in your house, you're talking from your cordless handset to your base unit, and then it goes into the telecommunication network, over Verizon's network, and you can talk to somebody in San Francisco. Same thing with
Curvature of the
cellular.
earth, the Rockies, nothing...
It's with cellular, you're talking to a cell tower, and then it's going on a landline out to the Rockies, and it can come out to
On
a
the
cell
landline.
tower out in Colorado.
It doesn't go from tower to
It
tower.
doesn't go to tower, no. It'll go through the landline once the tower communication is made established. So your wireless handset is now in communication throughout the nation or the world.
So I have a question. I mean, if in fact, we're looking at this tall tower, which I'm sure most people would feel is not really attractive, and it's very noticeable. But even with that, it's not perfect coverage. From what I'm reading here, it's not perfect coverage. So would it be advantageous for us to look into numerous sites? Like Bill said, we actually have 2 very tall flagpoles down in Agawam. We have a flagpole down at Cooper's Beach. We have a flagpole which could be changed out to be a taller one down at Dune Beach. And we're breaking it up. Instead of having it as one very large tower with all these things hanging off of it, and it's totally unattractive, to maybe several that are palatable and from an aesthetic point of view. But would that give us as good coverage or even better coverage if we looked at it that way?
Well, it depends on where those poles are located and how the whole network falls out, but it could give you better coverage depending on where they are. There is limitations to flagpoles for the carriers that was indicated before. You have a slim pole, you can't fit as many carriers in there. You may only be able to fit 1 or 2 carriers. When I say carriers, I mean like a T-Mobile and a Verizon, a Sprint, and AT&T. Those are the 4 licensed carriers in the area. So you may only be able to fit 2 in a slim contained pole, like a flagpole, because they have so many antennas and they need to stack those antennas. But you could put 2 poles side by side, within relative close proximity. Sometimes you may see three poles together with 3 different flags on them. You could get carriers on them like that. And usually around a 70 to 90 foot in that range with multiple poles will provide some good coverage for the carriers. So that would be something, the village has village property. Do a comprehensive plan and look at that. Where are these gaps? Where are there needs? There may be a way to have other locations available or multiple locations available, so multiple smaller sites can be built in the right place to bring coverage where it's needed, as opposed to a taller site trying to push that signal further distances away since there's nothing else there. One of the advantages of this location is it's co-located with the police department that do need better communications. So going to these other locations doesn't help the police department. They still will have a need for their
Yeah,
communication.
but we could do something for the police department without all of that hanging off of it.
Their antennas would need to stick off because of the way their antennas propagate the signal, but they don't have to be as high as we have.
Can the antennas that are on top of the police department right now, could they go to Agawam, from Agawam, go down, and suddenly they're strong at the southwest?
The type of system that the police department uses is a dispatch system, so it's a bit different. They typically will have one centralized transmitter location where they'll transmit the signals out to the users, and they may have multiple receiver locations where a user on a walkie-talkie will, since that walkie-talkie is much lower power, won't be able to reach all the way back to the central location. They'll communicate to a nearby receiver site, which then will be on a landline back to this main transmitter site and rebroadcast that out to the other users. So the transmitter site will need to stay, and it's common to have that co-located with their dispatch center where all their equipment is, so they can have all their wires and audio cables in one co-located spot. And then they may have several distributed receiver sites, which they have today. They just may need to add more to have equal communication between talk out and talk back.
You probably don't know this, but maybe someone else does. The town has a dispatch center, and the village has its own dispatch center, and both co-leverage the receiver sites.
They could. I don't know how the town and village are set up, but in many cases, there's no reason why they can't share the receiver sites if they're using the same type of, dispatch system.
And the height for the dispatch, though, does not need to be so high, right?
For this location,
Just in general, the height for,
well, the height of the public safety antennas will demonstrate their coverage, how far out they can talk and reach to their users. So increasing the height, currently they're about 48 feet on the top of the village rooftop, police department rooftop. They're going about 100 feet, so that's almost doubling their coverage range. Improves that quite a bit at their frequency band.
Any other questions, or is there any questions from the public? Come forward, Jane.
Hi, I'm Jane Clare, and I live on Cooper's Farm Road. This is my backyard, and I came here originally to discuss the health issues related to this type of cell tower, but now I'm kind of really nervous about the pollution it's going to cause to our village, the visual pollution. I did a lot of research about what and how close to cell towers and what kind of electromagnetic radiation is put out by the cell towers. I can share all that, but I think that might be better shared via an email rather than me going through the research I found. The one study I did want to share was about a pilot study in California with firefighters. They were working and sleeping in stations that had towers. And I would think that our police department and our other officials that work in that building would really be at risk of health issues. What this study, which was conducted, came up with is that right away, these firefighters had symptoms that included slow reaction time, lack of focus, lack of impulse control, severe headaches, anesthesia-like sleep, sleep deprivation, depression, and tremors. And I could go on, and I could also talk about the relationship to cancer, but I'm going to jump down to what note-taking I did during this meeting. And Dune Road was mentioned earlier, and there'd be no disputing that the majority of the residents there are not year-round. Cooper's Beach, maybe that's another consideration. And as far as the emergency situations that arise, can we go back to some old-fashioned kind of communication that might work better than what we have now so that we're not putting people in jeopardy? And the one question I had is, I believe it was stated that the village would be getting about $10,000 in profit from this cell tower. And I was curious what the companies themselves, those big entities, would be making, if anybody has any idea.
Well, it was claimed that it was $5,000 a carrier, I believe, is what one of you
I think
mentioned.
she's asking about revenue like for T-Mobile or for...
Right. I'm more asking about, I know what my phone bill is. I would assume everybody has the same thing going on. And I'll be the first to admit, I have terrible reception. But I would really like everyone to consider that not only is this hideously ugly, it's also not healthy. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Anybody else with any comments?
Hi, Paul Bolo, 95 Fox Hollow Lane. I was fortunate enough to be in the area when they were setting up the crane to do the test simulations from the different heights, and was given detailed information, I believe from you, which was great. Which was great. We were both in different attire, but he did go over the different heights that they were going to be testing and the transmission rates and what have you. And first thing that someone had mentioned to me is that the satellite cellular communications now are migrating over to satellite as opposed to cell towers. So, questions that I would think are important, since technology right now is moving at such a clip, would be, at what rate are cellular companies now migrating over from communicating between cell towers and communicating with satellites? One. Two, that the whips that are on the top of the police station that facilitate the communication for our emergency medical responders, they seem to be significantly lower than what's required for cell. Have we looked at, and I might get in trouble for asking this, have you approached the Shinnecock Indian Nation of whether it's something that they would even consider, since that's in and around the zone? Maybe they would welcome the idea of revenue coming in through there. But I think there's several questions, and thank you for the opportunity to present my concerns.
Thank you. Nick?
Nick Palumbo, 380 Hill Street. A thought that occurred to me listening to the presentation, I'm wondering what sort of leverage the village would have with Cablevision, since apparently they've asked the other carriers to dismantle their equipment there. And presumably, Cablevision is a service that operates in the public good. I wonder if we might have a dialogue with them to revisit that discussion. But I'm also wondering what would prevent the owner of this new tower from doing something similar and deciding that they don't want other carriers on there and then sort of reopening the question.
I think your question is a really good one, Nick, and because I'm sitting here kind of seething that we gave them permission to put up that tower, and then now they're taking everybody off of it? It's just wrong.
I was going along those same lines when I asked that question, Nancy.
Yeah.
What strikes me, though, I think is what you said, Rich, is even if we were to, put everybody back, they're too far away because the perimeter is too short.
That's correct. Yeah. Let me just get up so you can hear me. The Cablevision tower is pretty much the same location as the Powell Ave tower, and even though it's a 320-foot tower, the carriers wouldn't go that high because there's also a balance. If you go too high, you're going to create interference to their own cells, several miles away. So they have to try to balance that height with coverage and capacity. So it's further north. It's even just hopping on that tower, the additional height is not going to help cover this area. We need to be southwest of even the proposed location. Southwest is the direction of the objective. So getting in that area will help reduce the height.
Interestingly, at a smart technology presentation that I attended last week, to your point, Mr. Bolo, they mentioned that airplanes would act as satellites and blanket the entire country with cell phone coverage. I don't know if you've heard that, Rich. I don't know if it's something that's 6 years away but.
Yeah, no. The satellite coverage is not something that's going to replace the need for these cell towers. The satellite has been around for a while, and again, it comes down to coverage and capacity. So providing coverage inside people's homes, you need to be closer to the homes. That's why the sites are so close together. Even an airplane is several miles above ground, not going to provide that coverage into homes at that power level. Plus satellites, two satellites could cover the entire continental United States. So the capacity of a satellite to support all those users is not there. So there's always going to be a need for terrestrial-based communications. 5G, Internet of Things, there's a whole new spectrum of millimeter wave, even higher frequencies to support a host of new applications from smart public safeties to smart cities that are going to be tied into the whole integrated network of existing sites and newer applications, maybe small cells, things like that would be throughout the area. But satellite, no, would not be replacing this. Maybe augmenting it in some way, but not replacing these types of towers it needs.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
I wanted to comment about the...
Say your name, please.
My name's Father Constantine Lazarakis, 70 Old Town Road. I wanted to comment about the proposals for Agawam Park. Is this the appropriate time?
No,
After.
you should really do that after this,
I came late because I was, so
Okay.
I'll wait. I just
Perfect.
wasn't sure if it was the right time.
if you could, thank you. Rich, is it,
I just had a couple of questions. Deborah Bates, 49 Walnut Street. I wondered, since this is so high, is it going to be lit at night? Doesn't it? Doesn't have to be lit for safety purposes?
Over 200 feet or really
That's his driveway there.
The FAA requires lighting if the tower is over 200 feet above ground level, or if it's close enough to an airport, so it's within like the approach zone or one of the aviation surfaces.
So it doesn't have to be lit?
So it would not need to be lit. It would be a dark site at night, and we file with the FAA to get their review and approval, and so we would have a letter that would indicate no lighting is required that we could present to the village as well.
Okay, and the other question I had is, once the contract is signed between you and the village, who controls what this tower is used for?
It would be the terms of the contract that would govern it. I will say that Hemp Hill's in the business of building and leasing these tower sites to make money from the providers, so they would never want to boot people off because they themselves are just the tower company, not a competitor. Timpill doesn't provide any cell service itself, so they would want the maximum number of users to continue from a motivation standpoint, and then the lease itself could contain whatever terms that the village would feel comfortable with in terms of making sure things like that.
But the control of it would rest with you, your firm.
Well, I can defer to Rhonda too as to how they structure some of their things, but you can write in, whatever restrictions are appropriate for guaranteeing, village usage and space and, so on.
And the length of the contract?
You usually do like the 30 or 25? Usually about 30 years. 30
years, so you'd be committing to a 30-year period with some degree, perhaps, of control. I would just urge you to consider a site that isn't in the middle of the village, that, we're so much about what it looks like here. Stupendous amounts of time and effort are committed to what this place looks like. And beyond health and safety, I'm not sure cell phone reception is why people come here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Rich, any comments from?
I think I'm fine.
On board? One of the reasons that we're doing this presentation is because of the impact that cell towers create on a community. Is there a need? Yes, there is definitely a need, particularly out at the beach area, although we don't have 100% year-round residents out there. We do, during the height of our summer season, have some emergency situations, and it's always my fear that somebody won't be able to communicate because they only have one bar, and cell phones are necessary evil today. I know that all my children, none of them have a hard line. You go into their homes, none of them have a phone on the wall or a phone on the table. So times have changed. And we need to create a communication level that everybody can respond. And we often get a lot of calls in Village Hall in the summer, I don't have any cell phone connection out on South Main Street and so forth. So it is an issue. And how do you address it is the real problem. And how do you address it so it's visually acceptable? The idea of the police station is that we have an ambulance barn that's eventually going to be built up there. We have the police station. There's antennas there now. So to us, that was a reasonable place to look at, but we looked at a number of other places in the village, from Dune Beach to Cooper's to down by the Antique Fire Department, and none of those would efficiently cover what this tower would cover. So the intent of tonight is to leave this open, and I would encourage all of you to give us a written response, and I'd encourage you to reach out to other people that are in the area to provide us with written response, because there's a lot of people that are up on Cooper's Farm Road that aren't here this time of year, and they should be aware of it. And Bill, in your apartment complex, I'm sure there's a number of people that aren't there, that are away, and they all need to be aware of it. So, I think we should leave it open for at least a 30-day period to get responses from everybody.
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to point out, legally, this is an informational meeting, and if the village does decide there are a series of legal steps that would be necessary, one would be entering to a contract or lease with the provider But more importantly is that such a facility under our village code requires various approvals, including zoning board of appeals for special exception, which the presentation tonight did indicate, and there is a standard for where priority sites, and the first priority is to look at municipal or quasi-municipal sites in that hierarchy. So that is primarily why we have started in this vein. Second, there will be site plan and architectural review. All these steps, all would have formal hearings, all would be noticed, et cetera. So this is the beginning of the informational process, and I know that this board wants to get as much information before we go to the next step. So.
Good. And no other comments? Okay. So, and thank you guys for your presentation. Rich, actually, you educated me in a lot of things on cell phone towers I was unaware of, and your photos and stuff were very open and forthcoming, and that's totally appreciated. So thank you very much.
And I'm assuming we're going to post this presentation on the website.
Yes, yep. Good.
You can keep copies downstairs, too, if anybody wants to look at it and doesn't have a computer on the front table.
Now, if they have a cell phone. I won't go there.
True. Yeah.
Moving ahead, we have no board public hearings today.
Mike, we just wanted to go back to this gentleman's question about Agawam.
Right. Well, should we bring him in on
Well, we left
the
that kind of
second public comment, or?
Kind of left that board presentation open from last time, so.
Okay.
So do we want to do it then now?
Now would be better.
So you can come up.
So if you'd like to make a comment about the Agawam Park, that'd be great. We'd like to hear it.
Hi, everybody. Again, Father Constantine Lazarakis, 70 Old Town Road. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I read in the press about the plans for Agawam Park. I want to say, first of all, I think Agawam Park is amazing. We live in such a beautiful place, and I was grateful to hear that the town wanted to make further investments in public recreational space for our kids, for our families. Awesome. I love Jeff LaRue. I think he's a brilliant guy. Compand's great stuff. But when I heard that basically we were going to do, or we're proposing playground equipment for kids from, I think, 6 months to 12, I spend a lot of time in Agawam. I have 2 10-year-olds and a 9-year-old. And even in the height of the summer, that space is totally sufficient. More than sufficient. It's beautiful. The article said over the top. It is over the top. It's like a dream. But we have a big, we have a really underserved population in the village with our teens. And my kids are approaching their teen years. I do a lot of work with teens at the church. Just last Thursday, we had a youth forum on the opioid crisis that was sponsored by the task force. One of the 15-year-old boys got up when Jay Schneiderman asked, what could we do to, and he said, well, one of the main things you could do for us, a lot of great comments from these kids, was give us some space as teens. SYS is great, but it's not in the village. It's not walking distance from the school. It's not access. So what our teens have basically in the village right now are spaces behind buildings and park benches, coffee shops and candy shops, but they don't have anywhere where the town has said, hey, this is your spot, this is cool. They need to be embraced by the community, and we do a beautiful job of providing recreational space for our little ones. A beautiful, beautiful job. So, and I don't think I'm alone in this thinking, and I hope that some of my peers will come out and speak as well, but I think if we're going to outlay $2.5 million, I think that one of our major, major priorities, if we're going to create public recreational space for our children, is let's tell our teens, you have a place in this town. I also wanted to just encourage all all of you to have a discussion with the educators, have a discussion with the administrators at the high school, open a discussion with parents like myself, and open a discussion with teens. Let's do something in the village that is going to be a healthy, open, clean, embracing environment for our teenagers. I think it would be a much better use of the fund than expanding a perfectly sufficient and beautiful space for our toddlers and elementary school kids. They've already got a great space. Thank you again for all you do. God bless.
Yep, thank you. That's, Father, thank you very much for your communication, because that's the kind of communication we need back on various projects.
Constructive.
So with no communications further to the board, we have some suggested resolutions.
Sure. All right, item 1, resolve that the reading of the minutes for the public session of January 11th, 2018 be dispensed with. Those minutes be accepted as filed by the village administrator. The actions taken at the meeting be and hereby are ratified and approved. Got a motion?
Make the motion.
Second?
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Resolved that the claims for the warrants dated January 23rd, 2018, totaling $453,424.55, warrant 10 general fund, and the village payrolls for the period from January 5th to January 18th, 2018 be ordered and approved. Have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion. Item 1, AC electric building supplies for electrical supplies for the buildings, $1,361.84. Abdul Amir, Fire Department medical reimbursement, $1,000. Alliance System Integrators, camera for up on County Road 39A, $6675.56, and Firehouse Services, $1,164. Page 3, Carl and Jack's Building and Parks Clothing, $1,335.98. Corrigan's Landscaping, Emergency Snow Removal, $5,645.75. Maurice Corrigan, Fire Department Medical Reimbursement, $1,000. CSA Employment Benefit Fund, Premium for February, $28,468.44. 2 payments to Diane Signs for police lettering on vehicles, $1,550 and $27.50 on page 4. Ed Corrigan Jr., reimbursement for the Firehouse Exposition, $1,960.04. Chris Epley, Ambulance Medical Reimbursement, $1,000. Page 5, Richard Grodzki, Fire Department Medical Reimbursement, $1,000. Hampton Truck and Auto Parts, going on to page 6, Parts for the Garage, $2,403.39. Page 7, Leventhal, Mulaney, and Blinkoff, payment on the legal fees for the revamping the ethics code, $1,1250. Lewis Energy, fuel oil for the building department, $1,027.55. Matthew Bender and Company, PD Legal Supplies, $1,716.95. Howard McElroy, health insurance reimbursement, $4,138.03. Morgan Auto Supply, going on to page 8, parts for the garage, $1,793.49. Mutt Mitts for the parks, $1,056.35. National Grid for the buildings, $4,461.30. For the fire department, $1,235.96. And again for the buildings, $1,131.03. Page 9, Nelson Pope and Boris, consulting fees for the MS4 report, $3,191.42. New York State Health Insurance Premium for February, $322,131.45. New York State Unemployment Insurance for the fourth quarter, $5,564. Page 10, PSE&G electric services for the parks, $1,131.80. For the buildings, $3,228.46 and $1,972.16. And for the streetlights, $7,500.07. Page 11, Suburban Auto Services, PD car repair, $1,290. Suzanne Hand Associates, transcription services for the Gin Lane, Article 78, $5,507. Page 12, Titan overhead doors, service on the garage doors, $1,490. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item 3, resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby rejects all the recent bids for the reconstruction of the Pierce Concert House and accordingly authorizes the village administrator to send out related rejection notices to the bidders. Have a motion?
Make that motion.
Second?
Second.
Discussion. We had 3 bids come in. They range anywhere from $762,000 to $1,378,000, which is obviously way over what was intended. So right now we went back to Chaliff and Rogers, and they're scaling down the bid considerably, and we'll go out to bid accordingly to get it down to a reasonable number. All in favor?
Aye.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the refund of $500 building permit fee to Melinda Iannuzzi as recommended by Jonathan Foster, Building Inspector. Have a motion?
Make a motion.
Second?
Second?
Discussion, this is just a $500 permit for a pool that was paid twice. All in favor?
Aye.
Last one is resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves Oscar Ramirez as a probationary member of Hook and Ladder Company Number 1, effective January 23rd, 2018. Can I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
3 discussion items. Finance managers, our accounting system, and they're upgrading our system starting tonight. Pat and I will be out at training tomorrow and Thursday, and Eileen and Vicki will be in and out on those 2 days also, but we'll be effectively shut down through the end of the week. Okay, so didn't mean to have the confusion when I sent it around the first time that we were hiring a finance manager, but it's a system upgrade. Right, and sanitary system on 9 Main Street.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. Timothy S. McCulley of Council Park and Sullivan, 41 Meeting House Lane in Southampton. For the applicant, I have with me Scott Dobriner from InterScience. We have a couple of exhibits. Do you want them to be laid out on the table?
Yeah, I think that's the easiest to see and John, I think.
Okay, the property which is the subject of the application before you is 9 Main Street. It's next to the cheese shop here. It has 2 retail spaces in it. The owner of the property wishes to put a second story on that. Back in 2014, I appeared before this board. Some of you were on the board at that time. And I inquired as to whether or not, because our property is completely covered by the existing building, when we do the second story, we have to upgrade the sanitary system. We cannot do that on our location. We need to use West Main Street. Presently, there is an old septic system there made out of red brick, the old-time system. There's an underground buried tank there. As part of this project, both of those will be removed, and we will put in the upgraded system, which is going to be, as you can see, it's a grease trap, et cetera, and then a little area for expansion in the future. But as part of this, when I was here in 2014, the board, I wanted a sense of the board before we went down the road of all of the other applications, and the board seemed favorable at that time. Of course, it doesn't bind you, and that was not a binding agreement, or it was just a sense of the board. So I think what happened at that time, someone expressed concern that, look, if we say you're approved for this or we're going to do this, that it would influence the decisions by the other boards as they went forward, sort of like saying, hey, we approve of this whole expansion idea. So we went back to all of the other boards. We now have ARB, we have planning, we have zoning board of appeals. All the decisions are now in place. So the last part that we need is the permission, subject to the proper agreements and this proper protocol to put this system in West Main Street. It's not precedent setting. It's been done at Cittarella's. It's been done at La Parmigiana. In fact, I may have been involved in one of the earliest ones. I did the one for the driver's seat and the parking lot in the back, way back in the 1980s. I prepared a package for you, each of the members, and one for your attorney. What it contains is all the decisions that have been made since 2014, and a copy of what you see here on
One set, or is this?
Everybody gets a set.
Okay.
Tim, is this the building that has the two retail stores in it?
Yes.
It's the old pharmacy, isn't it?
No, it's not, because that doesn't have two retail stores in it. It's the one to the north of the cheese shop or to the south of the?
South.
So is it the
It's
very last?
Henry Lear, and what is the other place?
Oh, I know what
something,
building
whatever.
it is, okay,
It's two stores that mirror each other.
okay. Yeah, I know which one it is.
And as part of the design for, the new design, when we put the second story on, the front will be fixed so that it would now comply with the new code for our entrances and the separation, et cetera.
Do you have I mean, obviously you went before ARB, do you have a visual on this in here? I don't know.
I don't have one, but I can supply it for you. I don't have a visual front, but we've been to the ARB because it's in the historic district, obviously, on Main Street, so we went through all of that.
I have one.
You do?
I'd love to see it.
The request is for the proposed.
She's looking for the front, right?
Yeah, kind of looking to see what it's going to look like.
Can we do it down here?
Julie,
Oh,
do you
yeah.
make a few copies of that? She can make copies of that. Jig time.
Myself, my name is Scott. I'm a dinner science
Having a little trouble there.
My title is Senior Environmental Planner and Landscape Architect. All right, so. Where should I put this?
Yeah, probably be just as
This is the existing elevation.
Okay.
These were prepared by Will Schulz, who is the architect of record for the site. All right, and here we go with the proposed elevation.
increase, okay.
There we go. Proposed.
Michael, would it be all right if Julie made a copy of those?
Yes, yeah.
While we sit?
Yep.
Yeah,
Just let the public take a look
It's
at it.
probably good to note that both of the adjacent buildings are 2 floors as well. So we're just continuing the height, continuing the street wall.
Yeah, but we will architecturally, under the code, the second story in this building has to be set back a little bit to give it some dimensional character, and that's all been designed that way.
It conforms to all the village regulations, zoning
The
specifications.
ARB's already approved.
The ARB's already approved it, Planning Board has approved it, ZBA has approved the parking waiver, and as part of those decisions, I'm not sure which piece went in each decision, but there's a restriction about when we can build, how we can build, what kind of obstructions can be maintained when we are building. Those are all conditions of those approvals. So there'll be no building in the summertime, for instance. It's all going to be done in the off-season.
So basically, your visit to us here is to ask if you can put septic in West Main Street.
I'm sorry?
The only reason we're here is to request the use of your land
Yeah, right.
to expand the
I got that.
sanitary system.
Yes.
And you're paying for it, right? What are we doing versus you?
How does that work?
What's that?
Who's paying for what?
Yeah.
You're paying.
They're paying for it.
Paying
We're not
for,
paying
what
for
are we
it. We're
paying
not.
for?
No, they put the
I'm not
septic
sure
in.
Then we raise your taxes because now you've got a 2-story building. So
I'll take that up with my clients, not my taxes.
So you're opening up the road?
Yes.
And you're replacing the old septic tank with the newest commercial model septic
Right,
tank?
right.
Okay.
Yeah, and
But that's
You're
all,
repaving the road.
everything's on it's our ticket.
Good.
Yeah,
and you're removing that
Absolutely.
tank.
It's done.
But Scott,
Absolutely, and I think the protocol will require that we insure it and, so that you have no liability there.
This has
for
been
the
done
system.
I'm
numerous
aware of
times
the
in the
fact that it's
village, and
been
we'll
done.
just follow the same sequence of legal documents and approvals that have worked in the past.
Scott, I'll just throw this out to you. I mean, there's no requirement that you guys do this, but is there any chance that you would consider putting a updated, innovative system in?
Well, that's been the topic of a lot of discussion of late. We know that this space would work for a conventional system, which we are currently proposing. It also would work for an alternative system, based upon discussions with the project engineer.
Okay, maybe I can just weigh in on this. Sure. The principals of this company, the LLC, we've been involved in a lot of development on the East End. And I can tell you, while I'm not here to authorize or bind you to that, he has directed us on other applications to install those systems rather than a regular system. So if we can engineer it, he probably would not be opposed to it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that you're required to do it, but I'd love to see a commercial entity step up the bat and put a new system in.
Okay, we'll look into that. As I say, I'm not authorized to say yes or no, but as I said, based upon other projects that we've been involved in, if it's doable and reasonable, he probably would do it.
If you're converting to a juice and a coffee bar, right?
Yeah, but that's not open to the public. That's just one of those little things that sits in the back.
So you don't provide a public restroom?
It's an amenity for the customer that would already be going into the retail establishment. Whatever that retail establishment is, designer dresses or something, it would be a seating area for a patron, maybe a bored husband, someplace where the patrons can go to spend some time while other customers are there working with the sales.
I like that perk.
That's really what it is. It's a little added perk for the customer.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's not open to the public.
That's the differentiation that I was looking for.
I'm sorry?
That was exactly what I was looking for.
Whether it's a standard system or an alternative/innovative system, it doesn't change our request to you right now. What we're requesting to you right now is the use of that land in that blue rectangle.
And in anticipation of your question, we did visit that with the engineers, and they said that an alternative system probably could be put in that area.
That fits within that box.
Thank you.
Mr. McCauley, could you tell us about the health department, though? Would they approve it for a commercial use?
This system here?
Or the alternate system?
No, this system has been approved.
Design.
The design was approved in 2015, subject to us getting the easement for this. That was the only thing that was left on the NOI, the notice of incomplete. So, yes, it has been approved. We haven't visited the health department on an alternative system, but like I said, if it's...
I think that would be important before you undertake a whole engineering design and find that they wouldn't accept it for the commercial
I
use.
spoke to the health department yesterday, and they do not require an alternative system.
But would they approve it, though?
Excuse me?
Would they approve it for this commercial
They will
use?
approve a conventional...
Well, they've approved this system.
No, I understand that, but would they approve an innovative system?
Would they approve
An
it?
alternate system?
They're not requiring one right
We
now.
understand that, but would they approve the alternate system if you proposed it?
Oh, no, we won't propose it unless it's been approved. In other words, we would go to the health department as the first step.
What I'm asking is, have you gone to the health department to ask them if they would approve for this commercial use an alternate system?
No.
So it would be
But we're
important
in
for
the
you to do that.
process.
Right.
Okay, we're in the process. We
that.
understand that.
We
Before-
need to know that information.
Yes, and before we bind ourselves to the alternative system, we would be
Right.
sure that we can install it.
Right.
So we're in that process now.
Is that the chicken and the egg? Well, since we just received this, I think that all the trustees would like to absorb some of the stuff.
When do you think
have.
they'll start this project, provided they get all
We
of
would
it?
like to do it in the late fall, starting this fall.
So if we take a meeting or two that we're not,
I didn't expect you to say, great, go ahead
Not
tonight.
obstructing anything.
I didn't expect that at all.
And if you could approach the health department and see if
We will.
they,
We don't want you surprised.
yeah.
No, I wouldn't come here and tell you I'm putting an alternative system in unless I was sure it was going to work
Yeah.
and that it would be approved.
Oh, I think the
But-
system will work, but getting it approval.
Yeah, but I'm not sure how it works in a roadway type of thing or whatever. That's an engineering problem. So,
Certainly, we would appreciate you taking a look at it.
okay, we can do that.
Thank you.
Okay. Shall we come back another time?
Well, go see what you find out, and then let us know, and then we can take it from there.
Okay,
All right?
all right.
Makes sense?
I think we have enough information otherwise
enough
to
information.
proceed
And I thank you for
and
giving us all
act
of
on
this.
this.
And I'm very happy that we made
With the
the
signature
copies,
legal
that we got
documents,
copies of this. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because this really helps us see what's going on there. I mean, I'm
Okay, all right.
pleased with it.
Would
I've
you like
heard
to
about
see
9
floor
Main Street for a
plans?
long time.
Would you like to see what's in the files for the planning board, floor plans? Would you like larger pictures of that so that you can...
No, I get the picture here, and I'm sure if the planning board and the ARB are happy with it, they're happy, we're happy.
Okay. Well, everything was approved.
Right.
I can't remember if they were smiling when they approved it or not. but-
Oh, that's key. That's very
That's a key. Okay, so thank you very much, and thank you for taking
Okay.
us on
And just let us know when
short
you,
notice.
after you've met with the health department,
Yep.
and let us know how, what they're saying about your system and what you need to do there.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the last item is just Main Street parking. Getting some calls that we start enforcing again. The Main Street parking people are spending 6-7 hours parked in front of the stores. I know we went through this last winter, that we started, Tom, you wanted, I think we did sometime last winter, we started going around, right, with the 2-hour enforcement. I think we gave people, 15-day notice or whatever that we're going to start doing that, but I have retailers complaining that they're parking right in front of their stores, and these are people that are office people that are there all day long, blocking customer traffic.
We generally don't have a 2-hour parking in the winter, and as the spring approaches, we do warnings, and then we start to enforce, and it's unpopular, but that's our job. So whenever you want us to start, we will. It's just generally, in the wintertime, we don't, because Angel would be the guy, and he's busy.
I think we should try, if we're getting a lot of calls, are they during the week, or are they on the weekends?
During the week, because,
During
the office people are,
Oh, that's-
they're
yeah.
working during, Monday through Friday, and they're there, they get there at 9 in the morning, they're there up to 5 at night, and people complaining that their customers can't park, they don't have access to the store. And I guess in the wintertime, they don't want to park down the
Well,
block
it's cold.
to come to the store.
Colder, it's icy.
Neither do the office workers, but,
We looked into some
visual problem.
solutions, but we didn't find one we were happy with yet.
No, and the parking issue is a continuing.
You've seen quite a bit of it on the news, I'm sure, with the metered parking and the parking apps. We looked at it last summer, but we didn't find a company that we thought would work well here yet.
But we have no cell phone reception.
That's right.
Just kidding. So maybe we could do a warning coming up
Okay.
And just maybe as a reminder, they will pay a little better attention.
Okay.
Well, I think that's the end of the discussion items.
Yep.
So we have comments from the board members. And since Trustee Yuzgremski isn't here, Trustee Allen.
A community comment first. A very special person turned 97 this month. Happy birthday, John Holden. We hope you're celebrating all month. And then on February 1st, we have our next planning committee. Hi, Joe McLaughlin, always in our meeting room. Great. And you'll be covering the discussion around the dark sky legislation, which is shutting out light pollution, as well as the expansion of the historic district. And then on February 8th, it's just a reminder that we'll have another presentation on the impacts of gas leaf blowers. And last of all, our friends in the town gave us a heads up that there's going to be a sign up for affordable housing lottery that's being held by the town of Southampton for 2 single-family homes on North McGee and Moses Lane. They're being donated and built by the Business Alliance. Thank you, Business Alliance. And to register, they actually recommended something really interesting. They said you should have anybody that you know that, has a median income of $120,000 or less, go to the site and register, because that HUD sets the threshold for, what's it called? I think it's called, I had it here. AMI stands for Area Median Income. And then they set thresholds around that depending on whether you're 1 person, 2 persons, 3 persons, 4 persons, and then whether you're looking to buy or to rent. But interestingly enough, if you go to this site and you sign up, they'll send you notices of all of these upcoming housing opportunities, whether it's houses or rentals. So go to that. It's apparently easy to do on the Southampton site. And then the lottery for these 2 houses, you have to sign up on February 28th, and that's a different process. But once you're in the system, you should be able to get that email that tells you how to do it.
That's great.
That's some great info. Yep. And Trustee McGann?
I don't really have that much. I mean, tonight's meeting was pretty good, and I'm sure I don't know if you want to talk about the DEC meeting. I don't, talk about that.
I can mention it, yep.
Yeah, so, no, I really don't have very much more to add.
Trustee Hattrick?
I'll skip the usual dissertation on sweet gums. Wayne, you and I were talking before, and I know Kimberly was there, but in regard to this cell tower, proposed tower, which this particular shot was taken from my little street, which is a very short street. In any event, did I understand you to say that this would have to go through the various boards, and therefore the surrounding neighborhoods, would they, when somebody's building a house, I don't know how far in either direction of the house you go with notices, but I think anybody that lives on White Street and Cooper's Farm Road and God knows some other places, they should get a notice of this, because that I was even under the impression that somehow it was just going to be a long pole with no
That's what I was under the
antennas.
impression now, too.
And so it is going to look as bad as the other towers in the village look like. And anyhow, I think we owe it to people, and I think, frankly, we would be inviting a lot of litigation if somehow it went up without people having a fair chance to express themselves. End of sentence. Amen.
Duly noted. I think we can talk about how this board, as well as the other boards, make sure everybody gets notice.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
I won't let my wife see the picture.
You can bring it home tonight. I want to thank Trustee Allen for doing such a diligent job in tracking down the Housing Authority and some of the things that she's involved with, one of which is those weed blowers and leaf blowers and so forth.
Things that make noise.
Yeah, which is great.
Go bump in the night.
No one can think anymore.
I'll tell you a real quick story. years ago, I mean, this was many years ago, your dad was a trustee.
Yes.
And I was out front working on my yard, and there were 4 guys with leaf blowers going down the street. And I mean, I remember him distinctly, a green Ford pickup. He came down the street, jammed on the brakes, got out, and he just read these 4 guys a riot act. And all of them quickly scurried away, and for very good reason. I mean, they all were in unison, and sometimes they get those machines going and they rev them up. You know, I mean, have you ever seen a person that's got a Dodge with a Hemi in it, you know, and they're stopped at a red light? They never can just leave the thing idling. They got to rev it up a couple of times, and that's what they do with these.
They went over to Hill Street then, right?
Yeah, that's what they do with these leaf blowers. It's just, they can really be obnoxious. So in any event, we have a bunch of good stuff going on between that and the reason for our presentation on the cell tower was to get your input, and I asked the general public to please get back to us, because we know how impactful those things are, and we also know the need for continued coverage on cell phones. They seem to be the communication item of choice as opposed to a landline. We also met today, I'll mention, with the DEC. I think Gary was very concerned on what the meeting was going to be about, and he kept calling me, and I kept adding people to the meeting because he was concerned. But we had a terrific dialogue with the DEC. We talked about Lake Agawam. We talked about our projects that we have going for capturing runoff, and we discussed our wish list on how we would really want to see no discharge into Agawam at all. We talked about the sediment on the bottom and doing new testing to see if there has been a change in the sediment, because we have put a lot of catch basins up in Bowden Square and Windmill Lane, Culver Street, Pond Lane, and if you go down by Little Reds, you'll see that we have a project going there now with an old pipe that runs from, I guess, all the way from Main Street down Job's Lane, feeds from South Main Street, and really Meeting House Lane until it starts to drop off towards the hospital. And we're trying to repair that pipe. I think some of it is brick almost, you know. I mean, it is old pipe. And put in catch basins along the way so that we don't have the sediments going into the pond. You know, my wish list is no discharge in the pond, period. And to achieve that, it's expensive, and we need to find some funding sources. And again, the DEC was very cooperative with us and directed us to a number of different sources that we should look at to help fund some of these projects. You know, there's still the ongoing project of putting in a septic system. And while we've stepped aside a bit from that, that's going to come up again at some point. And they were very supportive of the idea, and also let us know if we do reactivate looking at a septic system. There are areas that we can go to today that can provide some funding help. So overall, it was a terrific meeting, and you know, in the past 5 or 6 years, I'm involved in a business that every time we see a DEC truck, we run. And you know, I got to say, in the past 5 or 6 years, every time I've had an incident and had to get them involved, they have been very, very responsive. They have helped. have stepped up the bat, they've directed us and helped us find resolve to the issues that we have. So, I got to really commend them for their activities today. They were terrific. They sort of indicated the governor had requested that they meet with us.
Wow.
So if that was the case, thank you, Governor. So that's really all I have.
I think also we are going to continue to look into cleaning up Lake Agawam.
Absolutely.
I mean, we had talked about the sediment, and we had said that if we, by trying to mitigate all of this, by keeping drainage from going into the lake, we still may have a problem there, and the problem could be generated from the sediment that's there, and that's something that we need to determine. So we are going to, Chris Gobler did a study on that, I think it was back in 2008. He took sediment samples. So I just said, well, do we need something more current? Probably we would eventually have to get samples. So that's something that we need to look into.
Yeah. And I thought it was interesting that the blue-green algae blooms that we get late in the summers in Agawam, they indicated that a way to resolve that is to increase the salinity value of the lake. So I thought, that was a very interesting concept. We do have a pipe that goes into the ocean that would drop the lake levels, and we only usually do that in the winter and in the fall. But maybe we could look at the possibility of putting another pipe in and raising the salinity.
They said it cuts the blue algae by 50%.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and it doesn't, and they evidently indicated it doesn't take much to do that.
Really?
Yeah. So, some real good points and concepts that were.
I think they did it in Georgica Pond, and it helped by significantly.
Yeah, and they do it in Mecox on a regular basis. And then also we have been continuing looking at the park projects. We've been looking at areas that we can downscale the cost and the expense. And certainly the father was very gracious in directing us that there is a blank for teenagers, and that's always been a real big issue in the village of Southampton, and it continues. Even myself as a teenager, I got to admit, I used to be one of the guys that used to sit on the wall around Rogers Library and count loser laps,
But I think it's kind of interesting, because I was thinking to myself, so what is it that we could create for them? Do they need a building where they could go and meet? Because now they're doing all these studies on how teenagers are not hanging out in malls anymore because they're all on their cell phones. They communicate on their cell phones and their iPads and their computers, and they don't socialize the way they used to socialize. Everything is done via, the internet and or their cell phone.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, that sounds really terrific, but what do we do? I mean, do we create a building where they could have a dance? They wouldn't be interested in that. I just don't know. And SYS has all the equipment for them to go out there and use that. So I'm sort of like thinking, what is it that we could do? We have to put our heads together to come up with something that we could do for them. I don't know.
And it also shows the importance of the cell phone, I'll tell you a real quick story. I had my son, who's a diesel technician out in Utah, but he came back and worked for me years ago, and he was, just outside being a teenager. And I would send him out on a job on an outboard or an engine that he had no concept of. He had gone to school for a number of years and had graduated as a diesel technician. but he would come in and he would say, "Hey, Dad, I need this part number, this part number, this part number, and this part number." Now, in the meantime, I have mechanics that have worked for me for 30 years, and they go in, "Hey, I need the hose that makes the long loop around the back of the engine." And, I sort of pushed it off, and every motor, he kept coming in and telling me the part numbers of the parts he wanted. So finally I snuck out there, and sure enough, there's his phone sitting on the back of the engine, and he's just pulling the part numbers off the engine. So, today's generation is completely different. And
They look up everything. If
yeah.
you have a question on anything, it's right on the phone to look it up.
Yep.
So I think times have changed, and we've had a lot of seniors asking for places to go, and I know that that's an important thing. I just think that young people, I'm not saying that I don't know what we can do for them, and that's what we need to have further discussion as to what they would really want.
Yep, we do.
So I think his suggestion was a good one, to reach out with the educators and his colleagues and understand that better.
I just don't want to go and do something and find out they're never going to use it. I would never do that because...
Yeah, well, I don't think we know, really.
Well, that's my point. I don't know, and I'd like to know.
We need to reach out and find out.
Right.
I have just one more thing. Wouldn't it be a good idea with this proposal tonight on the cell tower, which certainly is not the prettiest thing that has ever hit the South Shore Fork, this communication problem that, is a real problem, couldn't we find some electronic communications expert who could tell us whether or not there's something you can put on the top of the police department that hits the pole in Agawam Park, which hits the flagpole down either at Dune Beach or at Cooper's Beach, or some other way of at least slaying that problem? And we can decide, obviously it would be nice to get an income from this other, although in a $30 million budget, I don't know if $5,000 or $10,000 a month.
I think the income is irrelevant to the impact.
To me, yeah.
It's irrelevant to me as well.
We ought to try and find somebody who can tell you, now this may not take care of every little cell phone anomaly that we have in the village, but that communication where you're talking whether or not firemen and policemen and so on, and the ambulance crowd.
So I have a question, Steve, for you, on the lines of your question. My question is that if we had numerous towers, not like that they're putting up, but lower ones, but more of them that were disguised, could that handle so that aesthetically people are not upset over it? Would that handle the load? And is there concern about our police, ambulance, and fire department being able to communicate? And if in fact we had that, would that enable them to communicate better if we had several of them around? Because they're kind of saying this is the tower that's going to keep them communicating and they won't be out of reach. And I'm looking at the beach and I'm not seeing exactly perfect communication down Meadow Lane, but if we had one or two flagpoles along the way on our right-of-way or, down at Dune Beach, maybe somewhere in between, would that help alleviate our issue here?
The problem is location. We did look at Dune Beach. We did look at Cooper's. For one, Cooper's you're building in a dune, okay? And then Dune Beach, while you do have a bigger area there, don't forget these towers come with accessory buildings at the base of it. So it's not just a pole going up, And
they didn't show
felt
that on
that
here,
the
did they?
pushback
No, they did not.
on Dune Beach would be much stronger than...
Well, they don't show a building at the base of this, and if that
That's
is
just
the
a photo
case...
simulation for the height. But all the
No,
equipment
but
goes
see
into
now, I
buildings
don't
at the
particularly
base.
like that this is a photo simulation of the height, and they're not showing the building that gets put on the base of this.
Right, no, they just, again, this is just...
So this is even worse.
The base is...
I think you need to look at the preliminary nature of what we're talking about. Obviously, this was done for basic informational purposes to show the need and what how they would determine this. There hasn't been the true science that would be involved. But one of the things going forward is, and Nelson Pope and Voorhees have already advised that they don't have the technical expertise that this board may seek or the village may seek, and perhaps to get somebody that has that expertise to maybe tell you about the alternatives that you're suggesting.
That's what I'm, exactly
So
what I'm
maybe
saying.
that we take advantage of that and look at those so that we can weigh and make sure we weighed all the alternatives before you move forward into the next steps. But certainly, part of the process would be a full environmental assessment, which is much more detailed than what you see that they did preliminarily here just with that photo sim. So with the actual building impact as well as the analysis of all the alternative sites.
But what I mean, I don't want to say this because I know we started with this company, but everything I'm looking at here, I don't know if I want to go any further with them. And are we obligated to?
No.
No.
I would like to look at other alternatives because I don't think this will ever be accepted by our community in their residential neighborhood. Just my thinking.
Well, that's why I'm saying,
Yeah.
can we consult with somebody who knows
And the point
electronics?
is, if you need to go further, there would be a consultant who would be able to advise you of all these other alternatives. So at least you
Well, we
can
need
say
that.
you weighed those if you were to move forward with this
Right.
proposal, or you go with the other alternatives.
Right. And the other thing is, it was brought up about Cablevision and that 300-foot tower over there.
That tower is in the town, by the way, not the village.
Yeah.
The one off of Mariner?
Cablevision is. The Cablevision tower, the 300-foot tower, is in the town. The one near the railroad station is within the village, but that's not Cablevision.
So the one that is in by the by the car repair places, that's in the town?
In the industrial area, yes.
That's
Mariner Drive in the town?
Yep.
That's the one you're talking about, though, the one that's...
Mariner Drive? Actually, the line goes through it, so.
Oh, I thought that was village. But we had to go, we were required to go over there and take a look at it. We went over to look at it to give an approval, so I'm a little confused over that.
Well, because it was on our border.
But that was an existing tower, so I don't...
No, there was nothing there before.
The 300-foot tower is in the existing tower that's in the town portion. The monopole that's near the railroad station is different.
I'm totally confused.
The big tower, the big tall tower.
With everything hanging over it. That's in
Right.
the town? Huh, interesting. I thought all of that was village.
I'll second the motion, if somebody will make it.
Now we got the second public comment here. Anybody from the public would like to make a comment? And since there are no takers,
Oh, we have a taker,
we have a taker, okay.
Mr. Bolo.
Comment on the cell tower, comment on parks. I wanted to bring up one of the issues of, I brought up the dog park, because I have a dog to the dog park. The Lola Prentice Park runs off into Windmill runs down to Pond Lane, to Lake Agawam. It's road runoff, it's contamination, it's waste from animals that's typically contained by someone doing the right thing and picking up after their animal. So I've noticed in some residential applications as a form of drainage, sometimes they excavate any areas that have issues of compaction or drainage, and they'll excavate down to the sand and then backfill with sand, put topsoil in place, a small layer of it. And I think it remedies a few issues. One, runoff, and in the dog park, the little Apprentice Park, that would not only be being able to maintain the lawn with greater ease from compaction, but it would also mitigate, I think, some of the runoff there. And that's also something to consider with the proposed location that I think you guys are leaning away from over there, is that it's in close proximity to a park that's used really year-round and not seasonally, unlike some of the other parks within the villages. That you do have a high occupancy of, again, all people of all ages, from a few years old to into the senior community. So might want to look at the now vacated rear portion or westerly portion of Lowell Apprentice Park that was formerly used for the impound temporarily, and that's now been relocated to the south. Might want to look at doing, whether it be a skate park or something like that, which I just discussed with Father Constantine. But a lot of things to think of.
There are.
And, thank you for giving me an opportunity to present to you again this evening.
Well, thank you for your input.
Thanks.
Any other comments? With that, I motion to adjourn to executive session for the purpose of discussing legal matters and personnel matters involving village employees.
Second?
Aye.